on this episode of Dr. J's Office Hours.
And I thought I had a real strong handle on it because I understood that it didn't matter to the outside world what the hue of my blackness was. It only mattered that it was visible. And so from the perception of all the people that I grew up around, I was the black kid in town. And then all of that shifted when I went to college and went away for a year in Zimbabwe to study politics. And I was the white kid in town because I was so fair-skinned there that nobody saw the pigmentation. And so that was sort of a rude awakening, a slap in the face, a bucket of ice cold water of none of this is even real, right? We get swept up into the perceptions of others in order to define who we are. And at the end of the day, the only thing that really matters is, are you a decent human being?
Peter, what's up, brother? How are you?
Good, man. It's great to see you, Jay. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm doing real well. Thanks for asking.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for your time and your willingness to be, on Dr. J's Office Hours. I'm so excited for this conversation, man.
Man, let's get real. Thank you for having a space where we can come together and talk, right? It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure and an honor to make time. Thank you for taking the day in, day out time it takes to produce this and connect with people and bring them on your show and have a show at all to inspire people and have people to come listen to. I mean, that's huge.
Thank you, man. Thank you. So, Peter, I know you have lived a life. You have traveled the world. You have been in some amazing spaces and had some incredible lived experiences. Tell me a story. Please tell me a story.
Yeah, man. To get to that space, because like you said, that's the kind of the here and now, right? Traveling around, doing my thing. But, growing up from the very beginning, mixed race kid, because you know that in the black community, the culture of hue is, politically its own podcast, right? We could just spend the rest of the day talking about hue and versus opportunity, etc. So, but growing up a mixed race kid in an all white town with whose father was black, whose mother was white, and whose father fell into that typical stereotypical sort of space of, he was an alcoholic, he dropped off the scene and just bounced, just wasn't there at all. All of that informed sort of that early upbringing, right? What does a brown kid do in a white town with a white mom surrounded by, all white kids who nobody embraces because he's brown and doesn't have a role model to recognize what it's about to be brown or what it's about to be a black man in American society. And so that was sort of how the early portion of my life kicked off, right? Just sort of figuring out, who am I and how do I fit into this scheme? And a lot of that in the early days was focused on recognizing that I one of these things was not like the other, right? And sort of that, and so and figuring out, okay, so if I'm not like that and I'm like this, what is this? And having to kind of figure out, what that meant. And I thought I had a real strong handle on it because I understood that it didn't matter to the outside world what the hue of my blackness was. It only mattered that it was visible. And so from the perception of all the people that I grew up around, I was the black kid in town. And then all of that shifted when I went to college and went away for a year in Zimbabwe to study politics. And I was the white kid in town because I was so fair-skinned there that nobody saw the pigmentation. And so that was sort of a rude awakening, a slap in the face, a bucket of ice cold water of none of this is even real, right? We get swept up into the perceptions of others in order to define who we are. And at the end of the day, the only thing that really matters is, are you a decent human being? Do you care about other human beings? Is humanity something that's important to you, something worth preserving? And then recognizing that within the answers to those questions lies this more complex web of, okay, well, there's an illusion that people live as a reality, kind of like the Matrix. And so you've got to be aware of that and be able to also live within that and navigate that successfully. So that was sort of the early goings, right? I think, by the time I was 20, I had been wrapping my head around that and really just kind of going, oh, all right, this world is far more complex than I had anticipated or had any clue about, when I was getting off the jump as just a little kid running through the neighborhood. So, and I didn't have one of those, I had one of those super tough as nails moms who was like, she didn't take no mess. So it was like, there was 3 of us. I've got 2 older brothers. And, you just couldn't step out of line. She was basically like, I've got 3 boys who are all enormous and hard-headed. So in order to make this work, this whole dynamic work, I'm going to just have to get all of them into line. And so she just lock it down. There was no nonsense, right? Other friends could go out. They could stay out late, they could be out all night, whatever. They'd come home and talk back to their parents. And I'd be like, dang, you talk to your mom like that? Or you talk to your dad like that? Well, dang. But at my house, you wouldn't have it. You get a shoe to the head, you get a shampoo bottle flung at you, whatever was closest, man.
Yeah, whatever, you said it, whatever was closest. Remote controls.
Yeah, there was nothing was off bounds, right? So, and it was all based on you. What did you do? What were you doing? And did you do something wrong? You trying to, and can you? And sometimes you could just be like, I blew it, my bad, won't happen again. But oftentimes, especially when you're young, you're too young to really recognize that that's a solution. To learn from that and apologize right away and then not repeat the behavior. So when you're young, you kind of fight it. I was having fun. I wanted to go out with my friends. And that would always escalate the moment. But nonetheless, those were some of the early defining spaces of figuring out first externally who I was, and then having that external perception invalidated and having to figure out internally who I was. And that was really the transformative space, is when it didn't matter any longer as to how anyone perceived me or who perceived me in what way, but only how I perceived myself and what was important to me as a human being moving forward with my life. That was a critical moment. And recognizing that within that space, coincidentally, I happened to be somebody who cared about society and cared about people who were underprivileged and cared about, the world around me in a way that I would do what it took in my life to try to support other people and their process and their journey as well. I could have had that exact same experience and come to a completely different realization. I'm a narcissistic, self-serving son of a, and who only looks out for oneself, right? That. I'm sure that's other people's experiences, but for me, it just turned out that, recognizing my place in society and who I am in society also meant recognizing my own responsibility, my self-imposed responsibility in society to acknowledge that, there are people who aren't as fortunate, literally by birthright, right? So it's one thing, we grew up super poor, but we grew up poor in America. Poor in America is completely different than, poor in Zimbabwe, where I had to live for a year, where I chose to live for a year, and recognizing that level of poverty compared to what I called poor growing up, you're just talking about two completely different worlds, right? So, those were really informative, transformative spaces for me, and going on those journeys, living those experiences, have made me in a very large way who I am today.
And would you say sort of the toolkit that you used to define who you were when you didn't necessarily have a physical role model in your day-to-day, would you say that created more curiosity for you to explore different cultures and different environments and different languages and such, to be able to have a better understanding of how you fit in the world? You didn't have someone to look to in your household, and your neighborhood doesn't sound like your immediate environment, didn't sound like you could find somebody that looked like you. So was that sort of the catalyst for your curiosity to explore other spaces, or was it something else?
Yeah, I mean, so I initially came home with janky grades. It was like junior high, and I came home with an F and a couple D's, and my mom had a fit, man, that was, I wasn't sure I was going to survive it. I was like, oh, okay, this might be the end right here. This could be the end. So I knew that, like, all right, that wasn't gonna fly. I was gonna have to focus more in that realm in order to survive in my house, right? In order to stay in a house and continue to eat and have shelter and stay alive, I was gonna have to do better in school. And so I focused on, how to get the grades that I needed to get. And sometimes that was extra studying, and sometimes that was by being like extra charming with my, and engaged in the classroom and talking to the instructor and just letting the instructor know that I was there and I cared. Sometimes that made all the difference. And it wasn't even about, whether or not I read the book twice or I wrote the paper 3 or 4 times. Like, that wasn't always the point. Sometimes it was just about presenting myself and being there. And so when you talk about looking for that space and that curiosity, one of the things that I realized was, okay, these grades are essentially a vehicle to get me from point A to point B, right? So they get me from the dinner table to the bedroom, back to the dinner table the next day alive, if I do them right and I do them well. And they also, as I continued on along that journey, I realized, oh, well, then they also open this door to this other institution that is important socially, right? This concept of higher education, right? And so that led to university, college, right? And so then I find myself in college still asking sort of some of the same questions, and like you said, searching to a degree, but also I think that there's the moment that you recognize that a huge part, for me, 50% of my ancestry came from slavery, and before slavery from this country, Africa, there's this, that if that doesn't pique a curiosity, then you're not paying any attention, in my opinion, right? Like, you're sitting there going like, man, all right, my grandma talked about growing up in the South and how her parents were on a plantation, and I'm like, all right, she didn't talk about it a lot, so I didn't know a lot about it. And I was like, this is a curiosity. And then, obviously you learn about slavery, you comprehend the atrocity of slavery, you're living the repercussions of a post-slavery life, and you're a ripple in that wave. And so as you trace that ripple back to its source, for me especially, there was this intrinsic curiosity of what's it like in Africa, right? Like, as a culture, as a people, we call it sometimes, some of us, the motherland, right? And so, and what is that, what is the motherland like? And so when I had an opportunity to go there and live there, I was such a sort of, in some ways, I was so dumb. It was just like, Africa, that's where we're from, right? Like, it didn't dawn on me that Africa is a huge continent filled with multiple countries, and that within each country there are multiple cultures, languages, societal rules that differ from night to day within an 8-hour radius, right? In each country. And so, I didn't know. I was a kid. I was like, 18 going on 19, and I was like, I'm gonna go to Africa. I'm going to the motherland. I'm going home. I'm gonna go find my roots, Alex Haley style. Like, what's this about? And the program that was available was Zimbabwe. And I was like, yep, yeah, Zimbabwe. Like, just the name, just the saying the word Zimbabwe. It's like, man, where is that, right? Like, if that's not Africa, then I don't know what is. Later I recognized slaves weren't taken from Zimbabwe. The cultural roots and the historical present came, it was a whole other portion of the continent where all kinds of other politics and et cetera were going on. And that's, again, another podcast sort of in and of itself. But in that ignorance, I found wisdom, and in that search, like you said, where it was like, finding the roots, tracing it back, how much of this Black heritage is mine, and then tracing it to the wrong location, sort of Christopher Columbus style, like just landing in the wrong spot and finding something wonderful. I was really, I was fortunate to have the experiences that I had and to have the lessons that I learned. But yeah, to answer your question direct, was I curious? Yes. Was it a conscious curiosity? Sort of. It was the idea that I didn't belong in a place and that there was maybe another place where that would inform me of where I belonged, or maybe I would belong, and searching for that space. And then within that, I learned, I was present enough to, pick up languages and pick up cultural sensitivity, spaces and understandings of, where I was and who I was in that space and how I was to behave in order to not be offensive. And within that, there was a growth of knowledge that did feed that curiosity and made it more conscious. So I can look back now and say, yes, I was very curious about those things, but in the moment, living at that time as that kid, I was just like, something's not right, and looking to make it right. Does that make sense?
No, it definitely makes sense. And how had that sort of informed, or it maybe hadn't at that time, your career trajectory into what you're doing now? I understand that you have sort of a dual identity in a sense where you are an artist in one aspect, and I would argue an artist in the classroom as well, because I think that how we educate others is an art form. That's just me. I don't know if that's how you define it, but I do know those are two occupations that you have within your professional life. So can you tell me how you transitioned into working in education and into your artistry?
Yeah, that's a great question. To come back to your point, yes, 100%. Classroom is an art form. You can't stand up in front of a class of students and think that it's all going to follow some sort of book, right? Where it can be a uniform experience each and every time, and will be some sort of science where it's like, that's not teaching. It just doesn't work that way, because you don't know. Every semester you get handed an entirely new bag, and in that bag there are completely different things and different types of experiences that you're going to encounter, and if you're going to try to follow the exact same path each time, you're going to get yourself lost. So teaching is 100% an art form where you have to be flexible and malleable to what it is that's in that bag. And as you pull it out and recognize what kind of students you have, be able to give them what they need in the way that they need it, so that they can learn the lessons that will then move them forward. So all of that said, I would say my whole life, backing up, because one of the things I left out earlier was that, also in addition to all of this, my grandparents, the only reason I'm in California is because my grandparents were blacklisted as communists. My grandfather comes from a very prominent communist family on the East Coast and was blacklisted, moved to California. And so, we starting their life over, which is what got us here. And so coming from a very sort of, that concept of communism, socialism, that also was an incredibly informative space in terms of how I was raised and what I was taught in relation to humanity and my place in it. But all of that said, in the purest form of the word, I would call myself an artist, right? And it's in the sense that I paint, I draw, I sculpt, I write, I make music, I teach. All of these things are all just drawing from my creative well, which I always feel like is like right around here in the back of my head and my brain for some reason. It's like I'm always pulling from that spot to inform everything I make and everything I do. It's all coming from an artist's perspective. Like I was saying earlier, the classroom is an art form. Making music and going out on tour is an art form. Learning the languages of the places that I've lived and then using them is an art form. How you use them, how you play with them, how you change them, how you embrace them, and which parts change you. All of that's all an art form. So, art in the truest sense of the word. If you were to say like, nail it down, man, you can choose one title, I would say artist.
It's interesting that you named all those things, because there's this quote, and I could be butchering it, but you'll get the sentiment where it says, if I die and I stand before God, I want to be able to say I used all that you gave me.
Yeah.
And I think that that's, for me is an anchor for this angst that sometimes the world will put upon you for having multiple interests or multiple disciplines, right? It's like, you got to be this one thing, stick to this one thing, be in line with that thing. And then if you start varying, then, you're all over the place. You don't know what you want, blah, 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 blah. But in your case, you're doing exactly why you're doing all these things and where it's coming from and where you're pulling from and how you are able to navigate all of those different momentary identities, right? And in a moment you're a sculptor, but in another moment you could be, a vocalist. In another moment you are a professor, right? So in these momentary identities, I think that as a whole, we get caught up in having one identity that's sort of supposed to define all of what we have to offer. And I think sometimes we can get confused on how to navigate that. I know I do, just because of how society has placed upon us to do this one thing and do this one thing really well.
Well, how would we have the Renaissance period if you could only specialize in one thing, right? Like the entire Renaissance period, where you had people like Leonardo da Vinci, who were scientists and astronomers and artists and creators and inventors. Like, how could you have that period if the only way you could be good at something would be to specialize on one, right? Like, that was a concept that came later, coming out of the 60s, 70s, 80s, this idea of like, we just want society to specialize in one thing. We want you to stand on an assembly line and screw the cap into the flashlight, and then we just want you to do that all day, 8 hours a day. We want you to be the best and the fastest person to be able to do that. and we'll pay you, and then we'll give you this retirement, and then you can retire and you can live out your life, and you just did that one thing really well, and you can know you did that. And that's what we need for society to really move forward. That was a concept that became popular. But the reality is, in this modern era, with the economy as jacked as it is, if you only do one thing, so let's just say you're only a musician, right? COVID hits and you can't earn any money because you can't go out on tour. You're caught in this cyber box for performing, right? I got my guitar in the background. I've got to get it and I've got to fit it in this window where you can hear it. And then I've got to have, and like, that's not, so that your entire life, your entire bread and butter, all your earnings, everything that you do and to make a living because you've specialized and you're the greatest guitar player maybe ever, whether you've been recognized for it or not, it all comes crashing down and gets shut down, not because of anything that you did, but because society is no longer viable for that type of career, because you've specialized, because you listened to the jack of all trades, master of none, and you were like, no, I'm going to be a master of something, and you thought that you could only master one thing. But the reality is, the reality is you put your time in, you put your energy in. What you master is dependent upon how driven you are, how much force you have in your own life to pick up and push forward and learn new things and internalize those things and spend time really embracing them and figuring out whether or not they are things for you, right? So like, if you were to say, oh man, so you're an artist, you paint, you draw, you sculpt, I would whittle down and I'd say where I'm really the best is give me some wax or give me some clay and I'll make you a sculpture that will just blow your mind. Give me a paintbrush and I'll paint you something that'll be interesting, because I can paint, but I'm a sculptor within that genre, right? Like, give me enough time and I'll make you a masterpiece watercolor, but I am not a watercolorist. Does that make sense? So like,
right.
Even within those dynamics, you've got to figure out, because there is only 24 hours in a day, you got to figure out where you're going to focus, right? And so like, I'm out now, after investing my Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours into sculpting, I've invested another 10,000 hours into playing music and touring and writing and recording. And so, just adding that to the playbook. But if your limits are based on your own ability to manage your own mind, they're not based on what somebody else tells you, right? So if somebody else says to me, oh man, sorry Pete, man, you do too many things, you're not focused, I would just say, you just don't know me well enough, because the moment that you meet me and the moment that you see all the things that I do, you recognize, oh snap, like I didn't realize somebody could be so good at so many things. And that's, right. But it doesn't just, you also don't just get to have those things. It's time and work and dedication, and it's the absence of joy and fun. There are moments, man, where it's like, I'd love to just not have to focus on something new and think about something new and just, shut everything down. But that's not how you get to that point. Yeah, just be. But that's not how you get to that point, right? That's not how right. And so, the quantity of time invested, the quantity of work that is behind every sculpture, that's behind every lyric, that's behind every album and every moment that I stand in front of a classroom, the quantity of work behind that is absolutely enormous. And so, and it's easy, right? Like, I love watching basketball, right? So, the season starts, man, I sit in front of the TV, I watch the game, and like, you see the guys make the buzzer beater, or you see the guys miss the buzzer beater. And I'll sit on my couch and be like, oh man, you get paid X amount of dollars, you should have made that shot, or, whatever the case may be. But when they do make it, I think to myself, even though logically I know it's not true, I think to myself, that's what you get paid for. That's what I'm talking about. You made that shot because you put it, but I don't recognize, like, it was that quote, and again, I'll probably butcher it, but it was Michael Jordan who was like, you didn't see all the shots I missed to get to the shots that I made, right? And that when I heard that, when he said that, I was like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Like, there's all this work that goes into getting to this one moment where you hoist that ball up and it goes through the net at the right moment, at the right time, in the right way that makes you win that specific game. And then what people also don't recognize oftentimes is when that game's over, you wake up the next day, there's another game. So nobody really cares what you did yesterday.
and that's it's so interesting you brought that up, because I love hoop as well. I love it. And it's interesting that you brought that up, because I think in some ways I would argue that they get paid the big bucks to see if they will miss. Because if everybody knew that your favorite player was not going to miss a shot ever in all the games that they played, who would watch?
That's right.
Who would watch?
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? What Marvel movie would Marvel be as popular if every time that their character was in a movie that there would be no nemesis, right? Like everything would always go good. There's no challenge, right? So it's kind of like this twisted, we have this twisted reality that, like, we want the person to lose or to know that they could lose. That's why we pay the money, and that's what entertains us. And so I think, to go back to where, this idea of being a jack of all trades and a master of none, sometimes we have to toggle in between both, because we want to put in a work enough to be good at what we do. But the fun and the work comes in of being okay with not being good at what we do, and the person on the other end decides on whether or not we're they deem us as good or talented. Like you said, there's a guitar player maybe be the best in the world, but may not be recognized for it yet. Right. You know what I mean? So I think that's a part of the work. That's a part of the experience. That's a part of the journey. That's just sort of my perspective on it. What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. But I also think that there's this added element, right? Like, when I started playing music, I grew up in a music store. But because I grew up in a music store, surrounded by music and surrounded by musicians, I thought I'd branch out and do something different, which was what got me into sculpture in the first place. My grandmother was an artist. She painted, she could paint, she could draw, she could play any instrument that had strings. She was just exceptionally talented and was an inspiration in that way. And so I was like, I'm gonna go make these sculptures. And I did that for a long time. But when I was 37, right, I had this epiphany, right? I was at the Louvre in France, which is this, incredible museum that holds the Mona Lisa. Mona Lisa, the most famous painting in all the world, right? There's very few places you can go in this world and talk about the Mona Lisa and have people go, what's that? Never heard of it, right? It's the most famous painting in the world. And I'm standing in this long line to get to see it, because there's everyone wants to see it. And as I get to the front of the line, I recognize that when people would get to it was their moment, when they would get to that space where they could see it, they'd turn their backs to it and they'd pick up their phone and they'd take a selfie. I was like, man, you're standing in front of the most famous painting of all time, and you've got probably 2 minutes to take it in, tops 2 minutes, to really sit and look at it and pay attention to it and study it, right? You're in front of greatness right now, and you're turning your back to it so that you can take a picture of yourself as the star and the hero of this moment. You're missing the point of the painting, right? And so at this time, though, look, I'm 37, right? And I'm recognizing that all these sculptures that I've made, all these paintings, if this painting, this most famous painting in the world, is being viewed as a spot for taking a selfie, then what message is being picked up through the work that I make when I'm not even close to being at this level of fame, right? And I realized that people were probably missing the point. And so I was like, man, I got to figure out how to get into people's minds in a way that they recognize it, in a way that they see it. So at 37, right, I was like, man, I got to find a way in that's not just trapped in the visual, because clearly people are missing the point of the visual. So that's when I said, all right, I'm going to go back to my roots as a kid, growing up in a music store. I'm going to start playing music. And everyone I went to, every single person that I talked to said the same thing. You're too old. It's too late. You should have started when you were younger. You can't make it as a musician. And I was like, too old. Like, I'm fit. I feel good. I'm going to charge forward. And I stepped into a realm that I'd never stepped into before professionally, and just started paving a way. And so coming back to your question, like, one of the things that you really need is the ability to say, I'm not going to take no for an answer. I'm not having no, because nobody, when you have a dream, you know how important that dream is to you. You know how relevant it is and what it means to you for your life. But nobody else knows what it means to you. Nobody else actually really even cares what it means to you, because they're so caught up in their own dream, right? And so along your path, people are going to constantly tell you, no, you can't play here, you can't show here, you can't teach here, constantly reject you. Rejection is the norm. And if you accept that rejection, then you will find yourself without a show, without an exhibition, without a classroom to teach in, if you just accept the answer no, right? And so finding that space, finding that constitution, that inner drive to not accept no, right? No, with the exception of, and I say this to my kids just so that they're very clear about this, the only place where no means no is in the bedroom, right? You're getting intimate with somebody and they tell you no, that's a solid no, stop. In the workplace, in pursuing your dream, no is not no. No means you didn't present it in a way that I could understand it and say yes. So you have to either repackage it and represent it. You have to maybe go back to the woodshed and work a little harder to get better in order to earn that yes. But no just really means not yet. And so not right now, not right now, not right now, not yet, not as it stands. And so, and when you understand that concept, then you can push out of that. You can say, okay, I got rejected here, but now let's try the same thing in a couple other places. If it gets rejected in those places, let's tweak what I'm doing a little bit. See if I can, maybe I need to enhance something. Maybe I need to do it a little bit better. Maybe I need to do it a little bit longer. Maybe I need, whatever. And then until you find your yes. And that is critical. Not accepting other people's decisions as to whether or not your life is valid or your path is valid. Recognizing it's something you want to do, recognizing it's something that's important to you, and then chasing it. Because like when I started playing music in the very beginning, I had no clue where it would go. I just had no clue. I didn't have I had a dream where it could go, where I wanted it to go, but I didn't know if I could actually get it there. And I knew that I could spin my wheels for multiple years and never get anywhere, right? So that was at 37. Now I'm 48, right? And I look back at the last 11 years and I think to myself, I'm so glad I didn't listen to all the people who told me I couldn't do it, or it was too late, or I was too old. I'm so happy I didn't hear those voices. And I'm so glad I didn't internalize them, because I have taken this journey and made these albums and taken these tours and I learned to speak a new language, right? And it's like, all of that in the last 11 years because I put in the work, the time, the focus, the energy that it took to pick those things up and do those things well. And it was a fight. It was, blood, sweat, and tears, literally, but worth every second. All because I knew what I wanted. I focused on what I wanted, and I didn't let other people shut me down because they didn't think it was right for me. It's huge.
Would you say that was that same mentality is what allowed you to get into higher education? Not being willing to not be told no, or having to put in the work in order to be accepted in a space where it's more challenging if you're not a quote unquote academic to be in that world, right? You're coming in as an artist, right? Unless you're just, a visiting artist who's doing a one-off class, right? Like a one-off workshop, it's hard to be ushered in. You got to have all these credentials. You got to be, all the things, right? I know higher ed, and it's not the most easy industry to break into if you don't consider yourself a quote unquote academic, right? How was that for you?
So at the institution I'm at now, that I've been at for 15 years, right? This is my 15th year this year, right? So when I first applied there, it was just a straight no. First semester, fall semester, I applied. They were like, nope. I applied the second semester, and I met with the chair of the department, and he was like, oh yeah, he said, I remember your resume. You had some African stuff on it, right? He's like, and I was like, well, I had some African stuff on it, but like there was like a lot of, there's more than that, right? Like there's a whole body of work and study and a degree in political science and art and slides. And, I had everything, right? It was African stuff was like maybe an eighth of the whole thing, right? Like, and so,
right.
And how do you even?
That's all they saw.
And how do you even respond to that, right? Like, yeah, it did have some African stuff on it. Yeah, that's true. And he was like, yeah, we don't have a place for any of that. We don't have a place for that right now. Nope, sorry. Nope, rejected again. And I was like, thinking, man, all right. That didn't go the way I wanted it to go. And so I thought, I'm going to try this one more time. And I tried again. And, again, this is part of the journey that people don't talk about a lot, right? Like, I found out that the chair of that department liked to surf. I like to surf. I found out where he surfed. I went and surfed where he surfed and rode waves he couldn't ride, right? So, and while he was there, and it was like, and so then the next time I applied and I submitted my application, he was like, man, I saw you surfing that break that was like you and one other guy out there. He's like, I was too scared to go out. I didn't think I'd survive that. He's like, that was crazy. He's like, I saw you out there. And I was like, oh yeah, I remember that, right? Like, and to take that one step further, that break was crazy because I almost died that day, but he didn't see that part. I wound up literally crawling onto the beach and like, I didn't think I was going to make it back onto land. It was crazy that day. But he just saw me out there, getting after it, right?
You was getting busy out there from all he saw.
And so like, right. But what that did is, again, it transformed the moment from being that guy with the application who had some African stuff on it to that surfer who was badass and willing to get out there and get after it in a time where he was too scared to do so. And so that opened his eyes to a whole other thing that, again, none of this is even academic. This is all political, right? But it was the key to open the door to get into the classroom. And he was like, hey, you know what? I think I have a job for you. And I was like, cool, right? So he says, I've got a class called Color and Design. How are you with color and design? And I was like, man, excellent. I was like, I got color and design all throughout everything I do, so that would be a perfect class for me. And he's like, great, it's yours. I got home, opened up my computer, and had to Google color and design. I didn't even know what that was. I was like, what's he talking about?
I love that. What? That's the ultimate fake it till you make it story.
I wasn't gonna say no. I was like, what I knew was I had knowledge. I had the experience in the classroom as a student. So I knew, what it meant to be a student, which means I could flip that and understand to some degree what it would mean to be an educator. I knew that I wasn't just talking. I had all this experience. I made all this work to that date. I've had multiple exhibitions. And again, painting, drawing, sculpting, watercolor, like you name it, I was doing it. So, and that included like film, like cinema, making movies, making editing, and, Final Cut Pro. Like I had all these skills, and I just thought, it doesn't matter what you throw at me. I can figure out how to do it. I can figure out how to teach that class, and you offer it to me. I'm going to say yes, whether I know what it is or not, because I can figure out how to teach that class. It's not, if he was to say to me, all right, at that time I was 32, I guess. And so at that time, if he had said to me, all right, you're 32, I want you to be the starting point guard for the Lakers. Man, I couldn't take that job. I just didn't have the skill set. I didn't have that. I would have had to have said, I could have said, okay, cool, but I wouldn't have got anywhere. I could have practiced and gone to the gym and done, but at 32, with no basketball experience, never being a point guard, only watching it on TV, I was not going to keep that job, right? But offering me a job in art, to teach a course in art as an artist who'd spent years making art, there was no way I didn't know how to do that. And so I was like, yes, I will take that. And now, what were the nuanced elements that I needed to add to what I already had in order to focus it and teach it in that specific classroom? Yes, I had to pick up a couple books. I had to read a couple books that I hadn't read before. I had to, come up with a curriculum and a direction to focus the class. But I knew I could do that. Does that make sense? So I was like,
no, absolutely.
Yeah. So, but again, I give you that example in that story because you get rejected in life. Even when you can do the job, even when you are overqualified for the job, you still get rejected in life. And that's just the way the world works. People don't know you the way that you know yourself. You know what you're capable of. Other people don't. And you want people to respect you, you got to show them why they need to respect you. You got to show what skill sets you have. You got to showcase them in a way that people can see them and perceive them and understand them, and also recognize how those skill sets are then going to benefit them. And, when it comes to, like I said, with music, 11 years later playing music from that first no, I tour all of Europe. I've been all over the place, man. France, Switzerland, Belgium, Spain, all just through music, all across the United States, festivals, venues, private concerts. I've done it all just because I never gave up. And because I had something to offer, because I put in the work to make music that was worth listening to, so that when people heard it, it opened doors. When the teaching job was available, it became a 15-year career because I was good at it, right? Because I had the skill set. So I had to build that skill set. I had to build those, I had to hone my voice. I had to practice my chords. I had to play, I had to write my songs. I had to, all these things that lead up to this, right? All the hours in the studio making sculptures, having them fall apart, blow up, melt, everything had to go wrong in order to get to a place where it could go right, right? And even now, I'm still navigating, right? And it's just that in this current navigation, I can actually look back at things and say, oh yeah, those were accomplishments. But again, coming back to the immortal words of the great philosopher Eddie Murphy, what have you done for me lately? Right? Like, that's it, man, right? Like, what have you done for me lately? And so I let go of everything that I did yesterday because I still got things to do today. I got things that I need to do tomorrow. And so I'm just, every accomplishment, it's like, oh yeah, great, you did great. Now, what's next?
So what advice would you give a young professional period, regardless of their industry? What advice would you give a young person afraid to be rejected or hear that no when they have so much ambition? They know themselves better than anybody. Like, I can do the work, I have the talent, I have the skills, but they get in that, they go out for that internship or they go out for that job, that position, and they get told no. What advice would you give them?
It hurts. It hurts to hear the word no, but there's basically 2 rules to playing music. You can't faint on stage, because if you faint, you might come to before, when the concert's over, or they're going to whisk you off stage and take you to the hospital. And you can't die on stage, because if you die on stage, that's the end of that concert and every other concert from there forward. Outside of those 2 rules, you just keep going. You can break a string, you can miss a note, you can forget your lyrics, you just keep going. So when you're doing whatever it is you're doing, whatever that thing is, if you stop because somebody told you no, that's on you. That's not on them. That's on you. You can't accept that moment. You can feel the pain. It's gonna hurt. It always hurts to be told no when you want something, you're chasing it, and you think you deserve it, and you don't get it. It hurts, and it's gonna hurt. But guess what, man? I got a small violin for you that I can play a concerto for you. It's like there's very little sympathy or empathy or pity in that regard. You got to pick yourself up. You got to get back after it. You can't let the fear of the pain or the pain itself stop you. Because when you get told yes, the reward is greater than all of the punishment, all of the pain, all of the fear. When you get the yes that you've been hunting for, man, that's everything, right? That's everything. Mm-hmm. It's that moment, like, you think about back when we were hunters and gatherers, right? You go out to hunt and you don't catch food, how many days can pass before that's going to be a problem? So the moment you catch that food, you bring that food home and you eat after a couple days of not eating, you're going to feel real good about that. And you're going to think, man,
that's the best meal ever.
I've never been so grateful to have this meal, right? And so that's everything, right? Like and the no that you just received, that's not special. We all get it. Everyone's going through the same thing. And sure, you might say, well, yeah, but I had a friend who got a such and such job on the first try. Okay. Somebody else is going to tell them no about something else, because we all get rejected all the time in life. Rejection is a part of it. It's a part of the journey. It's not special. It's not unique to you. It is here. Everyone experiences it at every level, right? I mean, Jimi Hendrix went to the manager of the Rolling Stones with an album, with a demo, and was like, hey, check this out. I think I got something. And he was like, nah, I can't see it. Rejected. Jimi Hendrix, right? Like, if he had taken that word of that, and this is the manager of the Rolling Stones, who you would say, like, man, he knows, right? Because He manages the
Right.
Rolling Stones. So like, that's that. For him to not listen to that rejection and to continue to push forward is what made him Jimi Hendrix today, that we can all know and love and respect and appreciate. But if he had taken that one no, that one rejection, which I'm telling you, guaranteed, without having been there, without having been alive, I can tell you that hurt. When he was told no, he was like,
definitely.
All that time I've been putting into all these licks and how good I am on this guitar, and he's telling me I don't got anything? Like, man, like, what am I gonna do with that?
Right.
Right? So for all the young people who are coming up, who are getting after it, who are trying, man, brace yourself. The hurt's gonna come. It comes for everybody. You're gonna be told no. And you know what? When you get told no, put it on your chest like a badge of honor. Wear it with pride. Man, I got rejected for that. Nope, didn't get it. Next. And when you do get it, you can look at all those badges that you had to put on your chest in order to actually turn that into a full suit of armor, right? Next one up. Don't give up. The moment you give up, that's when it's over.
And what books is Peter reading? What are you reading, and what would you recommend to our listeners to also read?
That is a great question. So I think one of my all-time favorite books was Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man. And I had to get through 50% of that book. The first half of that book, I was like, what in the is he talking about? Like, what am I reading? Like, what am I reading? There was like easily 30 pages on one stained glass window that he was analyzing. And I was like, man, what is this about? And then I got past that first half and rounded the corner on it and realized, oh, this is one of the great literary works of our time. It is an unbelievable story about the journey of one man's life and all the hats that man wears and how he's had to navigate all the travesty of the world and how he, even when you think maybe he's lost, he's still fighting and winning in the end. It's man,
that's a powerful book.
It's a powerful book, man. That is a super powerful book. Another one of my favorites, shorter read, directly to the point. James Baldwin, Fire Next Time. That's one of my all-time favorites. It's a book that I made my kids read. Classic. I mean, you can open it to any page and learn a lesson. I mean, it's just an incredible text. And then there's a lot of books that come after those two that have been influential, but like without taking us all the way back, I'll try to make this as short a story as possible because I know we're sort of pressed for time in a way, but being the only black kid growing up in a white neighborhood, they opened this program called special education, and they assumed that because I was a black kid, I couldn't learn what the other kids were learning. So with the kids who were physically and mentally disabled, I was put into this special education class because being black was, in other people's perceptions, a physical or mental handicap, right? So, or disability. So, and when I was in that class, they would tell me things like I couldn't understand the books that I was reading. So I was reading The Phantom Toll Booth in the 3rd grade, and I was loving it, and I would bring it to school, and I would read a page at school or two and during the reading time, and my teacher had said, you can't understand this story, it's too advanced for you, and then gave me Sam I Am. I was like, this is your reading level. And I was like, I'm not reading this. And so there was years I went without reading at all, and I picked up a book that really changed my whole life. My mother gave it to me for Christmas. You know how you shake the gift, right? And it's like, you try to guess what it is, and my family, we did everything, we're Russian Jew on my mother's side, and so but we did Hanukkah, Christmas, Passover, Easter. We just did Kwanzaa when I got older. We did everything, and so so I had this gift, and I was like, I was shaking it. It didn't make any sound. I couldn't figure out what it was. I was like, I don't know what this thing is, and it was the first thing I opened. So I was like super excited. I opened it, and it was a book, and I was like, oh man, book. I don't want it. I wanted a toy or something.
Right.
And it was called Eyes of the Dragon. It was written by Stephen King, and my mom was like, just open it up, read a page or two, see if you like it. And I was like, ugh. I opened it up and I started reading, and I was just sucked in. And from that moment on, really, I have to credit Stephen King for opening the door to my literary adventure, because his creativity caught my creativity and lit a match to it too, and said like, hey, there's cool things in the world in these books, look for them. And so I read everything that he wrote, and then after I moved on from him, and I started reading everything that Watership Down was another one that was just like, I read Watership Down, and I was like, oh man, this book is not about rabbits, like this is heavy. And so like, I just kept like grabbing these stories and whatever could come my way, and I would read it and just was obsessed. And all my friends would be like, man, you read a lot of books, because nobody read anything. Reading had become this kind of like lost art, if you will. And I was just ferociously hungry, reading everything I could get my hands on, and anything and everything, And so, James Baldwin, Native Son, Alex Haley Roots, Malcolm X autobiography. I was just reading anything and everything I could get my hands on. And to this day, I look back on those sort of three moments: the Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, the James Baldwin Fire Next Time, and the Stephen King's Eyes of the Dragon. I think those three books transformed my whole life. Everything. Yeah.
I love that. And so this podcast is creates a platform for who I believe are either a creative thinker, a leader, or dreamer, or all of three. And I think as those who consume and those who look up to our leaders, there's a level of accountability that we need to have for our leaders. And so this question for you is really a question that you would have for our generation's creative thinker, leader, or dreamer. What would you ask them if you had an opportunity to share, your thoughts or your perspective on what we should be doing in the world to make it a better place?
Man, the difficulty of that question is it depends on what we mean by leader, right? So like if we're talking about people in government, the House and the Senate, when I look at those two bodies of governance, I just think, man, grow up, people. You can't even communicate with each other. You're on different sides of the aisle, and you can't hear one another, and you've lost the art of compromise. And that breaks my heart. And so when you talk about community leaders, though, which are different than governance leadership, maybe not bound by the same rules and regulations, I think that we've entered into this interesting space, right, where even though you may have like a Stacey Abrams who's really sort of invested in the community, you may have the idea or the concept of a Martin Luther King or a Malcolm X, that kind of singular leader isn't as present in the way that it was back then, where now you have lots of little movements that kind of crop up here and there and then merge together, right? Like you've got this concept of Black Lives Matter, right? Which is is kind of a movement, but kind of also just people who feel like Black lives actually matter, right? And so, and there's not one person that you would point to in this day and say like, well, that's the leader of our people, or that's this is the person spearheading this movement, which is so when it comes to the leaders, to the community leaders, the grassroots folks who are out there getting after it, I don't have a question to them so much, because I just I'm so grateful for the fact that they're out there grinding to pull people together and get them out into the streets and have their voice be heard. But I really do, for the leaders of the political leaders, I really do want to know, like, what happened to compromise? What happened to listening to the other side and finding a space in between? And accepting that maybe we all lose in order for us all to actually win, right? Like and I'm going to say that again because I want to be clear. Maybe we all lose in order for us to all win, right? Because we're so focused on winning. I want my side to win. I need to hold my position of power. We've lost sight, and I'm talking about political governance, we've lost sight of who we're governing for, why we're governing, and what the purpose of that governance is. And it's not about me or you. It's not about you in your individual job. It's not about the seat that you hold that votes on your bill that you put forward, or the amendment that somebody put forward. It's about the people. It's about the country. And in that space, both parties have to sacrifice. Both parties have to give a little in order to get a little. And that used to happen, but it doesn't happen. It's not happening right now. It rarely happens anymore. And when it does, we all look at it like, whoa, man, whoa, how'd that happen? Whoa, we did something. And even the politicians are making that same like, whoa, hey, how did we do that? Wow, we did it. Like, interesting. Yeah, of course. Yes, bipartisan support. They can't even believe it themselves, right? And so, I just, so that's my question is what happened? What happened to communication, and what happened to compromise?
That's powerful. That's a powerful question. Man, this has been such an engaging, wonderful, insightful conversation, man. I'm so glad that we had a chance to unpack all these things, because I think it offers a lot to our listeners, and I think a lot of people can grab some gems and some wisdom from your experiences and your questions, and your perspective on a lot of these different things that we all grapple with, whether it's being told no, whether that's, being in a body that is not accepted by, the general public or the environment in which you operate, or something as granular as asking a question to those who have political leadership and political power. I think all of those things are something that we all grapple with day to day. So I appreciate you, your wisdom, your time, and your participation today. I really do.
Jay, well, once again, thank you for having me on the podcast. It's an honor to be a part of it. But most importantly, thank you for doing it. Thank you for taking your voice and using it to make other people's voices heard. Because without that, we're all just shouting in the dark. So thank you. Pleasure, man. Real pleasure.
Thank you.
Real pleasure.